Welcome to This Week in Hastings Headline History, where we take a look back at what was making news in Hastings and St. Johns County, Florida, over a century ago. In this podcast, I'll share stories directly out of the pages of the Hastings Herald, which was published weekly in the early 1900s. So let's go back in time for some of the top news stories from this week in 1920. One more election for city necessary. Perfect accord and unity formed the keynote of the meeting Tuesday night of members of the old and new councils for the purpose of finding a way out of the tangle into which local municipal affairs have slipped. Both bodies were plainly anxious to get the matter smoothed out in a manner that would leave town affairs in proper legal and financial condition, and after an extensive conference, it became evident the correct method had been discovered and agreed upon. One more election will be necessary for the purpose of leaving town affairs in a condition which would be beyond question or criticism. This election will be held at the earliest possible date, and the council elected at that time, which will be beyond question the present new council, will take office immediately. The resignations of the members of the old council were prepared so they could take effect as soon as legal points could be settled and a new council elected. The resignation of Mayor R.M. Burt was also prepared and signed so that to all intents and purposes, Hastings is now being governed by a body of resigned men who are obliged to continue in office until their successor shall be elected and qualified. Proclamations calling for a new election to fill vacancies in the office of mayor and 6 councilmen were prepared by Attorney Walton, the intention having been to have them posted Wednesday. Mr. Walton was delayed in their preparation, however, which resulted in their being 2 days late in reaching Hastings. 15 days must elapse from the time of the posting with the time of the election, which means the new council will be unable to assume office until very early in April. Fine hog farm in the section. To the Hastings district has fallen the honor of the possession of one of the finest hog farms in the country, headed by a famous boar said to be the most noted Poland China boar south of the Ohio River. While to many local people the fact that this farm, the Black Diamond Farm of Elkton, has been established will be no news, but the real extent of its operations may come as a surprise even to those familiar with its presence. The Super Klansman, the head boar of the herd, is a son of the famous boar the Klansman. For his brother, Liberator, L.H. Glover of Kansas City refused an offer of $50,000, while another brother, Designer, sold for $30,000. At the time of refusing the offer for Liberator, Mr. Glover sold 36 sows, bred to that infamous boar, for $112,000, or over $3,000 for each sow. In addition to the Klansmen, the Black Diamond Farm possesses a herd of about 60 hogs, among them some of the finest big-type Poland China sows to be found anywhere in the South. By the 1st of July, it's expected the total number of this herd will be increased to about 250 head. The presence of such a farm in this district is a tremendous asset to the entire section, for it has been long argued by both state and national experts that with good stock to work with, wonderful success would attend the raising of hogs in this vicinity. The gradual elimination of the scrub and razorback stock so familiar throughout the South and the introduction of a stock of the type being raised by this farm will add vastly to the future prosperity of the Hastings district. On to this week's Talk of the Times, where I give you a glimpse of what people were thinking over 100 years ago. And this week, there was a lot of fuss over a potato contest. The Hastings Herald was offering a $5 reward for the first #1 potato weighing a half-pound or better that someone could bring into the newspaper's offices. The article reads, "As a proper start for the season of 1920 and an illustration of the general feeling of optimism prevailing in the entire Hastings district, the Hastings Herald will pay $5 for the first 1920 #1 potato weighing half a pound or better, grown by anybody, anywhere in the Hastings district. There are no other strings or conditions hitched to the offer. The grower of the potato may be a subscriber to the Hastings Herald or not. He may be a resident of Hastings proper or any of the surrounding towns and villages which comprise the Hastings district. He may be a he or she may be a she. It makes no difference. The first person to place a #1 potato weighing a half-pound or better grown in the Hastings district in the season of 1920 on the Herald's battle-worn editorial desk gets $5. Go to it." As a note, the general potato situation in Hastings seemed very decidedly bright, judged by reports coming in constantly. Various farmers who replanted after the big storm report that not only is the second planting showing up in fine shape, but that a noticeable percentage of the first planting is growing likewise. Since the coming of warm weather early in the week, the potatoes seem to have fairly shot into view. Potato growers of long experience in the section declare never before have they seen potatoes grow as the plants of this crop are growing now. That Hastings will see a splendid crop, barring the arrival of any further calamities, is now unquestioned. While if the prices in the north continue high, as everything indicates they will, the returns from the 1920 crop bid fair to mark a red-letter year, not far distant from that of 1917. And there was a lot of news in this week's paper relating to potatoes, all boding well for the coming season in Hastings. One article told of Texas potatoes being badly damaged from cold and frost, damaging 30 to 50% of crops. Bad weather conditions in the northern potato sections also reduced their yield, sending prices of potatoes upwards. The trends were expected to drop some, but things were looking very good for Hastings potato crops in 1920. On again, off again. While entering the siding at Hastings Station to wait for number 86, which was late as usual, train number 11 dropped a dining car off the string and allowed it to plant itself firmly in the soft earth. Both train crews, advised by a large advisory board from among the passengers and local citizenry, spent an hour or two in endeavoring to coax the car back on the rails, but with no success. It was ultimately replaced late at night by a wrecking crew after trains in both directions had been held up for extended periods. This was the third car to be dropped off at that point since the big storm. It is surmised that after a few more have met with a similar mishap, the East Coast Railroad officials may begin to suspect something is wrong with the siding and will have it fixed. Hurt in accident. Charles A. DuPont, the 5-year-old son of Cecil M. DuPont, was painfully hurt in an accident Tuesday afternoon while catching on behind a passing wagon. The little boy, in company with several other children, was playing near his home when the entire party suddenly decided to run after a passing wagon. In attempting to climb up behind, one of his feet was caught in a wheel, resulting in his being thrown against the body of the wagon and badly jammed up. He was attended by Dr. B.L. Paget, who found him suffering from painful contusions about the legs, head, and body, but it's reported his injuries are not dangerous. Caught large drum. John Markle and J.N. Pomar, 2 employees of the city force, went on a short fishing trip over to the jetties this morning, and at about 10 o'clock, they returned with 2 large drum as a result of their efforts. One weighed 45 pounds, the other 35 pounds. I hope you enjoyed this week's edition of Hastings Headline History. This podcast was brought to you by Presenting the Past, bringing history back to the present through historic presentations and the sale of treasures from days gone by. This episode was written and produced by me, Michelle Murillo, with the aid of vintage copies of the Hastings Herald. Now it's time for this week's musical memory, when we listen back to a song that everyone was listening to 100 years ago. Easter is coming, so let's look back to the early 1900s, to a song that was recorded and has become very well known around the world. At the end of 1912, the Reverend George Bernard was an evangelist with the Methodist Church. He'd had a particularly hard day of ridicule at a revival meeting in Michigan and started writing some words to a song. As he traveled over the next few weeks to evangelist meetings from Chicago to Washington, he kept adding words to his tune about his adoration of Christ and the sacrifice Christ made at Calvary. By January 12, 1913, he had all the words and the music together and performed it for the first time. The sheet music was published in 1915, and that's when another evangelist and musician, Homer Rodeheaver, heard it, and he bought the rights to the song. Some say he paid $50. Others say he paid $500. But that is a bargain for this song that's become timeless and recorded so many times over the past century. The first time in 1920, when Rodeheaver recorded it with Virginia Asher. Here is that recording of The Old Rugged Cross.
On a hill far away stood an old rugged cross, the emblem of suffering and shame. And I love that old cross, where the dearest and the best for a world of lost sinners was slain. So I'll cherish the old you call